Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to our next conversation on community resilience in changing times. This is week 10 and topic of the conversation this evening is work and money. Very important conversation. So welcome to Cathy and Viviana, and thanks for being part of this conversation this evening. Really lovely to have you.
Pleasure.
I'm just going to quickly read something to introduce the topic, and then I will hand over to you lovely ladies to lead us into this really important conversation. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge that here in the UK, it's the 23rd of March, and that marks 1 year that we've been in lockdown. I don't think any of us could quite have imagined a year ago today we would be still in this situation a year later. And I know that there are some memorials happening in the UK, and a minute of silence happened in London at 12 o'clock. So I just want to take a moment before we begin this conversation just to acknowledge today's date, and just to acknowledge all the people that have left us that we've loved in the last year, and all the change that we've all had to go through and embrace, whether we liked it or not. Just acknowledging that for a moment. Thank you. Okay, so on to our theme for this evening, work and money. While some of us may have been rethinking work and money in the most recent times of our lives, many of us have been forced into change one way or another during the time of the pandemic. In our world of duality, it's an expression of nature that as one thing ends, another thing begins. Maybe we can consider that our norms in relationship to work and money weren't overall the healthiest norms. And maybe now we can consider how to rethink these key elements of our lives from the ground up. As we witness what has come to an end, conversely, what has this time given life to? Have we ever really taken time to consider or understand our relationship to money, and consider this outside of what we consider to be obvious? For example, that we need money to survive in this world as it is today. With the shift in our work and home life, can this time create more opportunities to consider what we really value? Not all work can adapt and be adaptable online and be remote, and we just wonder, will this ever be the same again? And what might be our options as we start to come out of lockdown? In a recent study I came across from the BBC, which looked at the long-term societal effects of COVID, the study shows a significant shift in gender equality and diversity, how working from home has been nicknamed the Great Leveller. It's important in this conversation today to consider what this time has given rise to, an opportunity for, and how we can nurture this. This evening we have two wonderful women to guide us in this conversation, including offering you an exercise to explore your personal relationship with work and money. If you can, grab a pen and paper now, please do, before we begin this conversation, so you can make use of these exercises. For anyone who is watching this conversation live on Facebook, I invite you to engage with us in this process actively, and feel free to share your comments and questions in the chat box, and I will endeavour to weave those into the conversation as we continue. So, just to now introduce the two women that are going to be speaking on this conversation this evening. Firstly, we have Cathy Hilton. Hello, Cathy.
Hello, hello.
Nice to have you back with us. So for anyone who's been watching the series of our conversations, Cathy did our reimagining food conversation. Nice to have you back. Cathy teaches on how to harness the opportunities of loss to create profound fulfilment, including reimagining careers and our relationship to money. Very glad to have you with us again. And we also have Viviana.
It's a pleasure.
Great. So, and we also have Viviana. I forgot to check how your surname is pronounced, Viviana. JIMENEZ?
JIMENEZ.
JIMENEZ. Thank you. Thank you. Viviana is a director of sustainability and blue economy. She is currently evolving into a systems change enabler and also works with feminist economics, which I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. So Viviana, I'm going to hand over to you. You're going to lead us into an exploration, an exercise, which I'm going to be doing with everyone as well. So I will hand over to you.
Great. Thank you again, Catherine, for inviting us. And thank you everybody who's joining. So I'd like to start with, as Catherine was saying, a couple of exercises. So if you have a pen and paper, grab them, please. And the first thing, if this works, okay. The first thing I'd like to ask you to write down on the paper is, what is work? So this could be either a concept, a word, an idea, just whatever comes up for you, please write it down. And I will give you not a long time, but 1 minute to think about these things. Great. Here is the next question. And I think this is a very, to a certain extent, intimate question. And that is, what is money? I'll give you another minute to think about this one. And one more question, I'll give you 1 more minute. How are money and work related to you? Great. So I'll ask you for now to set that aside. We'll come back to that in a bit, and Cathy will go deep into those questions. But now I'd like to move a bit more high level to the meta. And for that, I'll start talking about work as an economic concept. And that focus will be on modern economics. And the first thing that I'd like to highlight is that modern economics, and like all social systems, is a narrative. Many times we are led to believe that narratives have always been, but that is not true. Narratives are created. And if we look at one example that I find really compelling is if we look at modern economics today, which is really around market markets and capitalism, we think, and a lot of things reinforce this, we think that it is the only way, or at least it is the best way. But that's not necessarily true. When Margaret Thatcher introduced her slogan, which she's known for, that there is no alternative, the purpose was basically to feed this into our heads, and that is what we believe today. But when she introduced it in the 80s, that was revolutionary then. Now we take it as a given, as the truth. Modern economics also places the individual as an economic being. So we talk a lot about, it being a generally rational and always man. Very, very little focus is given to women in this sense of economic being. And because of that, it's weighted towards normalizing men's lives. This really came from the Industrial Revolution, looking at manufacturing, and hence, work and subsequently ignores the experience of women. So it focuses on male work, man's work, and ignores many times the experience of women. Sorry. Some other things, sorry, before I go to that, it really, it normalized the system where the most exploitative and aggressive control through possession. In the past, it was by owning women and slaves. And today it's really by owning large amounts of wealth, which we can never really spend. Going back to the first point, we believe that narratives are timeless, that they have always existed, and that's the way things are. But in reality, they exist and they were created to uphold certain ideas. So how does this relate to our podcast today, which is really about changing times and resilience? Why does it matter to us? So there's a lot of talk in current changing times about the heightened need for collaboration, sharing economies, perhaps deepening social bonds and relationships. And what does this actually mean? It means that we need to really start looking more at socio-emotional work, at inclusivity, at perhaps creating collaborative frameworks. And with this in mind, I'd like to present a few alternative narratives that have begun to permeate modern economic thinking, although there is still a long, long way to go. One of these is feminist economics. And so this is really presenting an alternative narrative. It seeks to challenge the notion of work and production that are based solely on manufacturing. And it asks us to think about how we value different sorts of economic activity. It factors in activities that fall outside of main economic sphere, but without which the economy could not really run. It's concerned with all things human beings need to survive and flourish, and it asks us to rethink how we value different sorts of activity that occur in our economy. It really makes three crucial points. So first, it highlights socio-emotional labor, and that's the work of keeping families together, of maintaining social bonds, of nurturing and nourishing emotionally and not just physically. It also highlights the point that socio-emotional labor is not recognized as real work. We mentioned this in the beginning, generally in economics, what's recognized as work and therefore paid as work is manufacturing. It's more what it's producing. It's not really all this emotional work that's necessary to sustain society. And then it also highlights that power relations are structurally unequal because of this. So caregivers generally must depend on breadwinners for resources and therefore are somewhat at their mercy. But as we know, and as I've said, the economy needs and depends on care and nourishment, especially in changing times. And if we look at, the last year, the pandemic has really highlighted that. So as Catherine was saying at the beginning, people have had to stay at home. And I think people are now realizing that the work that is done at home is quite a lot. However, it still, for the most part, falls on women, even during the pandemic. Some other things that I'd like to highlight about feminist economics is that it really does look at nature and nurture as a way to sustain life. And then something that I think is important is that the challenge is not only to recognize and value that work and hence pay for it, but it really is looking at how to have these ideas permeate the logics of economic thinking. It highlights solidarity as an economic value. So it's key when people, are experiencing structural failures of capitalism. Solidarity becomes very important. It gives way to thinking about solutions to meet basic needs, which become apparent in crisis, wars, or, for example, during the pandemic. And then these solutions, it takes us to think about these solutions that go from reducing suffering, immediate suffering, to also rethinking new ways of organizing and system transformations. So that is really important about feminist economics, I think, that it's not only really about paying and valuing the work that women or caregivers, not always women, but generally, do at home, but also to kind of think about the broader meanings and how we can use this to permeate economic thinking. So now I'd like to focus a bit on a few examples of models that exist today, because many times when we think about these models or these examples, we think that it can only be done at a very local community level. But I'm going to show you at least 3 right now that are either regional or even national. So the first one is called Siembra con Mano de Mujeres, and it was an effort that came to be in Venezuela and due to the pandemic. So it came to be because of the pandemic. It's a program of productive communal plots, and it's led by women. And the whole idea was to supply food during lockdown. It also provides virtual training and network building, and it's at a state level. So it's a state in Venezuela where they're doing this, and it has been very, very successful in keeping people fed during the lockdown. The next one is called Solidarity Market Flor de Luna, and this is in Mexico. And this one actually spans across the entire southern region of the country. It's an effort led by women who participate in different productive and civic initiatives facing economic and ecological crises. It is a market that unites co-ops, organizations, groups from across the southern Mexican region to exchange products, provide capacity building workshops, and share what they call solidarity baskets with those most in need in that specific time. So they get together, I believe, once a month, and whoever has a need in that month, they will give these solidarity baskets, which has, food and other necessary items. And they also teach agroforestry to urban areas. So it goes a bit beyond just the people who participate in that market. And then a model, which is quite interesting, and it's growing in popularity and it's growing in importance in the Andean region in South America, is this idea of buen vivir. And this is a model that came from the Quechua indigenous people in Bolivia and Ecuador, and what they call it sumac causai, which is really focusing not only on well-being, which is a lot of what we hear about, but on good living. And for them, that means more consciousness, having functional and healthy consumption. So thinking about why we're consuming, integrating ancestral and rural knowledge at its core. It's a socio-ecological and a socio-emotional model. And again, this isn't really just at a local communal level, it's regional. And even more, this model has been incorporated into the constitutions of both Ecuador and Bolivia. So it's national, it's even binational now. But also this model has permeated into other countries in the Andean region. And so I guess one of the main things is, it's thinking about feeling good, about thinking good. And that means, having time for contemplation, having time to think about others. So it's really a different way of thinking about economics in general. And so I invite you now to think about what narrative we will move forward. And just to finalize, I'd like to leave you with one other exercise. So if you can please take your pen and paper again, and then I'll pass it on to Cathy, and she's going to really deepen after this exercise. But Not all of you can see the screen, but I'd like you to think about what is your money story. And in that, I'd invite you to think about a memorable moment in your life related to money. So that could be when you bought something or when you decided to, I don't know, get married, move countries, whatever that may be. And in thinking about that moment in your life or those moments in your life, what did money represent for you in that instance? So again, I'll give you maybe a minute, I'll put some music on, and then I'll pass it on to Cathy. Okay, I'm sure you can take much longer to think about all these things, but I will now pass it on to Cathy.
Well, thank you. That was definitely a pile of interesting thought. I had not planned things so thoroughly, so I'm going to freestyle rather more. I'm going to start off by thinking about, so we've titled this talk Work and Money, and there's the natural presumption that they're very intrinsically linked. We work to earn money, we have to work to have money, money is crucial. One of the fundamental issues, two fundamental issues we now have in society, we've got an extraordinary amount of frustration and unfulfillment. Many people are not being fulfilled by the work that they do. And there's also so many people not able to earn enough money to live any kind of a healthy life. I myself, about 2 years ago, I was running a business and it failed and I had a bit of a nervous breakdown. That turned out to be quite a good fortune because it made me have to stop the treadmill I was on. And because I've got a bit of an analytical mind, I separated work and money. And I love what that made possible. And I came to see that what we believe we need money for is a very, very unconscious conversation. We've got an incredible scaffolding of conversations, of belief systems around us that inform our relationship with money. For most of us, it's incredibly unconscious. And I'd like to do some taking that apart right now, because as I see it, when you see through the unconscious beliefs you have in your relationship to money, then you end up needing massively less. For me, maybe 10% of what I thought I needed before. You can seek work. It's not even seeking work. It's I've worked out what my gifts are, how I know that fulfillment will come from massively contributing to society. So I've worked backwards. I'm not thinking what job can I get. I'm thinking, all right, this is what I'm good at. I'd really like to contribute. I know that's going to make me feel good. So that's my priority. And then I'll look at how that can be money generating as a later consideration. And because I have separated the need for money, then that doesn't need to be a primary consideration. So I'd like to facilitate that thought process for people now. So if we start looking at what we need money for, I'm going to do an exercise, which is, let's take buying a car. You may well, you'll have a thought, I need a car. Probably it'll be because you need to be traveling, you need to just be able to get around in your life. You may think I need it for work. You may think I need to transport children, whatever. The thought you have is, I need to buy a car. Perfectly great thought, fine. What few people will also know is going on in the subconscious is around the choice. So there'll be a whole pile of influences around the choice. And for many people, what you're doing with the money at that point is not just buying the object of the car and buying the service that the car gives you, but there's a whole pile of other things that you're trying to achieve through this purchasing moment. You may be trying to buy the respect of other people. You may be picking a car that you feel will be respected by other people. You may be trying to buy your own respect. You may feel good if you're in a car like this and feel bad if you're in a car like this. You may be trying to buy future reliability. What is extraordinary is the more you step back, there are so many layers at which you can step back and see through the motivations. And the more you do that, the freer you are around what you need money for. So for example, if you see that there's an element where your subconscious thinks that you'll gain respect if you have such and such a car, you might come to see that it's not that you'll gain respect, it's that you'll gain the imagination that you have respect. And then you could see that it's a hollow win, because you have bought into the reality that respect is something external that you're given, and that you need to fit into a social narrative to get there. Does this make sense to you, ladies?
Yeah.
Could you reflect back anything of what you've seen in what I've just said?
I was I feel a bit caught out because I was looking at the notes from my I wrote from our conversation, and also responding to a live comment. But I was just thinking about the link between money, work, purpose and fulfillment. That just kind of brought that to mind from something you said. And how that was something I know I hadn't considered, actually. In my life, I hadn't considered the sort of the background, the layers to it, as you just described.
This is very common. This is normal. It's normal not to consider that. Viviana, do you want to say anything, or shall I carry on?
You can carry on.
You understand the concept of stepping back. You understand the concept of you may think you're just buying an object, buying a convenience, but that there's a whole pile of other psychology contributing to the amount that you spend. And how the more observation and control we can take over that, the less and less we find we need to spend.
I'm just thinking about, sorry to interrupt you, Cathy, I'm just thinking about that kind of that momentum that we can really easily get caught in, which you're kind of speaking to, of just like needing, like there's never a point where, okay, I'm done, I have enough.
Absolutely.
It's just like, and I notice it in my own life, it's even if I'm considering being in a very small space, there's still always something else I need. So is that what you're kind of suggesting to? Yeah.
That's definitely part of it, but also in that mix is the fact that we get a brain chemistry response to purchasing. So we actually feel good for a moment. If we are not feeling great for whatever reason, then that's a direction to go in to give ourselves a moment of buzz. And many of us, millions of us, have got into this ridiculous dynamic where we have to keep purchasing, and then this terrible cycle goes on where we end up, we have to have a job that causes us stress. We have to have a job that pays well. Quite likely that job will cause us stress. And then we're probably buying things to handle the stress. We may be buying massages, we may be buying holidays, we may be buying somebody to do our ironing. We're probably, so then we've bought all these things, and then we're buying a house to house these things, and then we're buying insurance, and then we're buying a holiday, and it has to be a really good holiday to be sure that we'll recover from the stress of the job. And it's this incredible tornado of purchasing. And at the bottom of it all is the overuse of the world's resources, because fundamentally the more we purchase, the more is being taken from the earth and the greater impact we're having on our ecological environment. So we add to our stresses this sense that we're not in harmony as a population with nature, and what are we doing? And our stress levels as a population are pretty through the roof at the moment, even prior to the pandemic, and worsened by the pandemic. So if we can stop, if we can personally take a break from this instinctual purchasing response and look at what we think we are achieving with the money that we spend, a very, very different world becomes possible for us individually. And the more of us that do that, it changes absolutely society. We could look at the different things that we tend to try and buy with our money. So you may be buying a car, you may be buying a holiday, you may be buying a house, you may be buying work clothes, but what is it that these things you believe will give you? Often it's that they're giving you self-esteem, confidence, they're giving you a position, a sense of status in your community. They may be giving you an experience of belonging. They may be giving you excitement. Why are we spending money to get excitement? Because we've become such an unhealthy culture. You know, there's so many ways we can, there's so many ways we could, and we used to have experiences of enlivenment. But in the last decades, it would be more common to be going and watching action films to get that adrenaline thrill that we yearn for. So everything has become a purchasing situation rather than looking for how it can be achieved for free. And another layer behind that is looking at these things are integral in us anyway. There's no truth to you have to do anything to get self-esteem. The bottom line is self-esteem is self-generated or it isn't. Confidence similarly, a sense of peace, a sense of happiness, all of these things can be self-generated. And we are in this incredible marketing maelstrom that informs us in every moment. You should buy this, you should buy this, you should buy this, you should buy this. You shouldn't feel good about yourself unless you have this. You're not safe unless you have this. You need this kind of insurance. You need that kind of funeral cover. You need these vitamins. You need to wear these clothes, you need to be up with the fashions, you need to have a savings for your children. These are sensible things, but can you see how it says absolute onslaught of obligation? What we each will be looking for underneath it all is things like a sense of peace, a sense of happiness, a sense of love, a sense of community. And the amazing marketing models have captured all of that to oblige us to buy 1,000 things. 1,000 things a year. It'd be interesting actually to map how many things you buy a year. And to identify, like you can look at, okay, this is what I'm buying, this is the object I'm buying. What is it I think that will give me? What is it I think that will give me? Like, so maybe the object is a car. I think that'll give me the ability to get places. What do I think that'll give me? That'll give me the ability to do a job or to buy food from a distant supermarket rather than my corner shop. What is it I think that will give me? Maybe it'll give me better nutrition, maybe it'll give me better work opportunities. What is it I think that will give me? And if you go down and down and down and down and down the layers, eventually you get to the same stuff. And the stuff that you get to is it'll give me health, it'll give me peace, it'll give me love, it'll give me community. And these are all things that you can get without spending any money. These are absolutely things you can get without spending any money. So if you turn your whole process upside down and say, okay, how am I going to get these things? How am I going to ensure that I have love? Make that a self-responsibility, not a result of something that you buy. How am I going to ensure that I have community? Put yourself out there, start engaging with people at a level that feels like a heart connection, not a superficial level. Then you experience community and you experience peace. Then nobody can sell you anything because you don't need to be bolstered to be satisfied. Then if your income requirements are massively cut, then you can start looking at, what do I really want to do with my life? And the reason, one of the reasons I'm convinced by this approach is if you look at what people say at the end of their lives, never is it, you know, I'm really proud of the way I dressed, or I'm so glad I made it to marketing director. Everybody says, well, there's a very interesting book, the Regrets of the Dying, written by a woman called Bonnie Ware, I think, Bonnie Ware. She was a palliative care nurse, so she was around thousands of people as they died, and she just saw trends. Top regret of the dying, I wish I'd lived a life true to my wishes. I wish I'd had the courage to live true to what was important to me rather than being swayed by all sorts of external influences. Second top regret, I wish I hadn't given so much to my work. If these are the regrets of people, if this is what feels most significant at that time in all of our lives when we have the most true sense of perspective, then let's take that back to our lives now and live it from now. Live it, let's implement that into how we're living at this point, not waiting until it's too late and it's a regret. So if you bring that to now, then what happens? Well, like I just did, you start breathing, you know, there's a relax, there's like, oh my goodness, what's going to be important to me then? If you've cut out, maybe it's 90% of your need to bring in cash, then you can make a very, very different choice about what you spend your time doing. You don't have to agree to a job that is not in line with your deepest values. And this is where then purpose and fulfillment come in. If you change your relationship with money, if you deconstruct all of the influence and all of the sense of obligation about what you need money for and what money can do for you, then your relationship with work changes, and it's very, very easy to become drawn into a purpose, and then fulfillment is a natural outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting listening to you, Cathy, because I'm really aware of how the two things you've already shared between you really link. It's like what you're speaking to is a very conscious challenging of what we're putting into money and what we're putting into work, and really looking at what are we really getting from it, what are we really seeking.
Yeah.
So putting ourselves back from this unconscious drive that is very much fed into our culture, and then kind of dismantling that in some way. And then I think what VIVIANA brought at the beginning is a different model that we can engage with, which really considers the core things that we need to be looking at valuing, you know, our better health, you know, living well, and you know, looking after our earth and all of those things. So
yeah,
and really,
those are natural outcomes of stopping the desperate chase for money.
Absolutely.
Once you quieten that conversation within yourself, all of the healthy behaviors come to the fore. You know, there are natural human expressions. So being community orientated, being ecologically considerate, these are natural expressions, but they are eclipsed by our stress of, I need to be providing all of these things, and I need to be feeling successful. Our sense of success is very much influenced by the culture that we live in and what are the people that we're measuring ourselves against. It's really worth stopping that measuring. It's amazing what happens when you stop that.
Yeah, just to add to that, sorry.
No, go on.
I think another another link here that's important is the power of story. So what stories, which Cathy brought up quite a lot, what stories do we tell ourselves about money? What stories? And that was a little bit of what I was looking for in that exercise of writing down, what is your money story? What does money mean for you? And generally what tends to happen, I've done this in the past, is that you get very positive attributes or words about money and work, because we really associate both as, in order to get money, we work, which is not necessarily the case at all. But we tend to have or very positive descriptions of money and work or very negative ones. It depends on how your outlook. So if you tend to think about, you know, you want more community-based things, or you're thinking about society and you think capitalism is bad, then money becomes conflict, money becomes divisive. A lot of this also has to do with how you grew up and the culture your family had around money. So for example, I don't know, one thing that I think about is, you know, if your parents used to fight a lot about money, then you think money is conflict. And those two things tend to happen with those exercises. And what, you know, the next logical step, which is taking on what Cathy was saying, is why, you know, why do we project these things on money? And so a lot of the time is either our personal experience or the beliefs we have and the narratives that we have been told. And this is from the systemic. So that was a little bit more of my focus. Within the narratives we have about economic systems, these are things that are being told to us continuously in many different ways. What we do at home is not really work. That's kind of just things you do. What we get paid for, that's work. Our passion, generally, we don't see as work because it's our passion, when, you know, we should be doing our passion as work. But anyway, so I think the power of story is so important, both at the personal level, at the global level, and everything in between. And like something that I would really like to leave people with is that we have the power to change that narrative at any point. And I think this also relates a lot to what Cathy was saying. We can do it in our own personal lives, but we can also do it at a global scale.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree so much. It is very normal to regard ourselves as a victim in a economic system. We may think everybody's got the where they put the blame. So for a lot of people will put the blame with people who are winning in the system. So people who are apparently winning, people who are earning amazing amounts of money. A lot of people will blame governments. A lot of people will blame corporations, globalization. But as long as you're blaming, you've got no power. You're giving away all of your power. And all of these entities are just in a dynamic with us. They have no control without our cooperation. So as long as we are buying and buying and buying into what is put to us as essential in our lives, then the system will continue. And conversations like this that change people's perspective can very quickly make thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people stop purchasing, or just change their purchasing behavior. And as soon as big companies aren't making the profits, they'll change their ways, they'll change their goals and their perspectives. So the belief that we're at the mercy of anything is another untrue narrative that's massively worth shedding.
Great. We've got quite a live debate going on here, just to let you know, actually. So just to say hello to David and Oliver, who are contributing quite a lot on the conversation. So David,
really?
David has said, yes, I had to learn the difference between work and real relationship. Work is important and fulfilling and puts you in touch with people, but it cannot substitute for relationship, which has many other dimensions. Many years to learn this lesson in my life. Thanks for that, David. And Oliver has said, yes, I agree with David, good format. They also commented on the presentation at the beginning that they really liked that to do a live exercise, and they really were grateful for that. So Oliver's also said, makes the audience a kind of lurker, but in a good way. Purchasing won't fix the short-term itch. It is inbuilt in the sense of how most of us are educated to consider success and achievement in terms of materially considering it. The psychology of capitalism. Reclaiming fulfillment is a great topic. So thanks, gents.
Right.
Really nice to have that. And David just also added a quote, story is everything. The world is made of stories, not atoms. Which is a quote from Muriel, and I can't quote the surname, but yeah. Thanks, gents, for your comments. Really nice to have that.
And sorry, adding to that, the world is stories. We have been taught to believe that stories, like many of the arts, are really the fluffy things. They're not important. And so we think about data and science, and when in reality, it's all very important. We need the data, we need the stories, and actually our worlds are built on stories. And I'd like to maybe take it a little bit further from those initial exercises. And this is an oversimplification because of time, but whatever words or whatever concepts you gave to money specifically, but also to work and the relationship between the two, you can see it as your projection onto money. So we human beings project our beliefs, our concerns, everything onto different things. Money, I heard recently that money is one of those things that we do it the most with because of the systems we live in. So one way to do what Cathy is proposing and kind of reclaim that is to actually understand that what the projections we are making on money are really projections about ourselves. So if I put money is conflict, thinking about, okay, how am I going to reclaim that? I am conflict, and then work with that. Of course, that's uncomfortable, but in the moment that we kind of reclaim everything that we have projected onto money, it becomes much easier to then move towards what Cathy is proposing, which is flipping everything on its head and kind of thinking about this differently. So if we start to think, okay, money is stability, for example, many people think money is stability, and I think I am stability, then money doesn't become important for that. And the reality is that when you think money is stability, you keep on getting more and more money, but you're not getting more stability, because that's not where stability is going to come from. So it's kind of reclaiming all those words that you wrote down or a concept and saying, that is me. And then kind of detaching that value, detaching that word from money. And I think that makes it a lot easier to then move towards what Cathy is proposing.
It's great. Thanks. I'm really wondering how we can speak to the how to do this. If, you know, go for it.
I'll do an exercise with you both.
Okay, great.
We could think of, you could either go with something that you've recently purchased or something that you're sure you need to purchase. So think of something that you purchased or that you need to purchase and tell me what it is.
Mine's very basic food.
Okay, that is an essential need. Let's go with something that's optional.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just in the process of decorating my new therapy room, and I'm aware I'm kind of like I'm going to be carried away with what I'm going to do to it and all the things I'm going to put in it. So I don't know if that fits, but it's because I haven't.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm definitely thinking about, you know, sort of reusing locally things as much as I can, and how far I want to go in terms of beautifying the space and spending money on.
Okay, so let's say the thing that you're thinking of buying is a redecoration. Let's just frame it as that. Okay, perfectly good. We'll come back to that. VIVIANA, have you brought something to mind?
Yes, I'll say post-COVID or when I'm vaccinated, trip. So airplane
holiday.
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect thing to think of. Right. So, Catherine, what is it that this purchase is? What is foremost in your mind about what it's going to give you?
Just wanting to create the most luxurious, yummy space for my clients. Yeah,
I'm going to write this down. Luxurious, yummy space for your clients.
I'm kind of just
okay. So that's the first level of what's in your mind about what this purchase is going to give you and why it's a reasonable, rational, sensible decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
VIVIANA, what's the first level in your mind about what a trip is going to give you?
Reconnection, relationship with people.
Okay. I like it. Reconnection, relationship. Excellent. Okay, so Catherine, what is a luxurious, yummy environment for your clients going to give you?
Happy clients. Hopefully happy clients. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. VIVIANA, what is reconnection in your relationships going to give you?
I think one big thing is fun, but also fulfillment.
Yeah. Great. Catherine, what is happy clients going to give you?
More clients.
Great answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I'm also I want the clients to be happy.
No right answer. It's what we're doing is it's like archaeology. We're finding out what is below. We're going down the levels, finding out what are
clients. I'm thinking just that I want the space to be made use of. Yeah. So it's I just want it to be made use of. I think more than
that's another aspect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. VIVIANA, experiencing fun and fulfillment, what's that going to give you?
I think that's the basic layer, fulfillment and joy.
Yeah, I did have a sense that was you got there rather quickly. But you can see how we would normally be able to ask this question repeatedly. What's that going to give you? What's that going to give you? What's that going to give you? And you get down to a layer of some fundamental quality. When you've got down to that,
sorry, I was going to say, yeah, it comes back to fulfillment for me. You know, I mean,
yeah,
it's fulfilling for me to see my clients receiving something, and
yeah,
you know, well supported and loved, and you know, that's fulfilling for me to be a part of that. So it does come back to fulfillment. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is very, very reasonable, sensible. It's a great intention. It's a great intention, and it could have a very broad spectrum of price tags. You know, somebody would refurb an office for tens of thousands of pounds. Somebody else would not refurb the office at all. So the question then is, if you look at this quality of fulfillment and bring that into yourself, can you generate for yourself that sense of fulfillment with nothing external having to have happened at all?
Yeah, I think I can. If I think about it consciously, yeah, I think I can.
Yeah, you can. And then you're free to spend money or not spend money.
Yeah.
And when you have that freedom, you don't need to earn anything. Then you don't have to do any job. Then you get to choose, what do I want to do with my life? And when you really have that freedom, people always choose something that has purpose. Nobody ever chooses something fundamentally selfish. When you really have that freedom, people choose something that is fundamentally beautiful, which is why there's an awful, well, it's one of the reasons why there's an awful lot of effort put into us not getting this. You know, we're so massively distracted in our lives because as soon as we really appreciate this, we stop purchasing.
And I'd like to take that thought and look back at work. So this, what do we think work is? And I think we've touched it from several different angles in this conversation. So we were made to believe that work is what we get paid for. But that is generally not the case, actually. We do so much work that we're not paid for. And one example was what I was presenting at the beginning, which is the work of, you know, caregiving, traditionally done by women, still done by women far more than by men at home. And with that, it's not only really caregiving, it's also nurturing people. It's also feeding people in many ways. And so I think I would add to that it's not really, you know, we'd still do the work. We are still all day doing work, but we're just, the work isn't just what we're getting paid for. And so when you can detach money and work, then you can really think about what will I need to get paid for, because I need to survive and I need to buy food and whatnot, and how much can I do, how much work can I do that is really fulfilling other things, either needs in society or needs in myself or needs in my family that is not being paid.
Yeah, and that is the process I went through last year, really. So I got clear, obviously I need food and I need housing. Pretty much everything beyond that is optional. So I created a situation where I swap 1.5 days a week childcare for housing, and I'm actually buying my own food, but if I needed to, there would be a food exchange probably also available within that. So all of my needs are met through a 1.5 days a week swap. So then I have 5.5 days a week to fulfill whatever I choose, absolutely whatever I choose. And what came for me to the fore in that whole inquiry was contributing to a shift in society. That's what feels like a passion to me, and that's what I'm doing right here now. And at this point, I'm not receiving any money for it. Don't care about that. Will do somehow at some point. But it's also not necessary, because I also worked through so much to find peace and find happiness, regardless of my bank balance, regardless of whether I can go on holiday or not. So the income levels are massively less significant than is normally felt to be necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I could pose a bit of a question. There's something that's in my mind. I've never been good at doing a job for money. I've always done jobs that I love, and as soon as I don't love it, I move on, and I've always been like that. So but I noticed throughout my life, having done that, I've met a lot of challenge from family members. You know, you should be doing, you know, you should be earning more money, you should be, you know, just generally sort of judgment in society about the choices I've made around that. I know I've just remember so many times just flitting through my mind as we're talking about the times I've had to meet judgment on my choices because I followed what I love and not followed the money. It just has never worked for me following the money. It just falls flat really quickly. So I've just since my early teens, since my sort of late teens, sorry, I've just followed what I loved, and that's been it. But I know that I've had to meet a lot of challenge to do that, and it's been uncomfortable. And so I'm just thinking about that element of it, you know, what we have to deal with to kind of to follow something very different, and how we have to deal with challenge from people around us in our family or our friends, or you know, general sort of societal views that people sort of take on board very unconsciously and then put onto other people. How do we kind of deal with that? And I think even you know, we're talking about the marketing that we're constantly marketed, you know, I'm aware that people unconsciously take on board a lot of that stuff. I need the best car to be worthy or to be socially acceptable, or so, you know, it's kind of stepping away from a lot of that as well. Yeah, how do we kind of it feels like it's something, you know, it's somewhat brave and courageous to sort of take that path in the world. Just thought I'd bring that into the conversation and see what you thought about that.
I have things to say. VIVIANA, do you wanna, shall I go? Shall you go?
You can go. I'll go after.
All right, so if I frame that as a question, well, I'm reminded of a book title I saw last week, which was How to Be Disliked. How to be all right being disliked. as particularly as women, we have an enormous sense of safety, security, dependent upon being accepted, being held by the tribe.
And accepted.
So if we alienate the tribe, we feel unsafe. But again, it's about being the observer. In the same way that we observe our relationship with money, we observe what we are thinking money will bring us. Observe what these people's judgments, what you feel you would gain in their acceptance and what you feel you're losing. You can observe these things, and you've identified it as projection. There is no truth. One of the things that I wrote down in VIVIANA's questions, what you think the relationship between money and work, I talked about it being good. Like a good person has a good relationship between money and work. I'm not a good person. I'm an experimental person. I decided to make my life an experiment, and to see, I decided to put myself on the line to walk this road so that I could have conversations like this, so that I could tell people it's possible. So I do things like I set myself a £200 budget for a holiday. A couple of years ago, I really felt like I needed a holiday, set a £200 budget for everything, wanted wanted, no, it didn't matter where it was, but it ended up being in Norway. I was watering somebody's plants. The flight was most of 100 quid, but everything else came in at 200 quid. So I live as an experiment, and I get stuff from that in the same way that you get stuff from being accepted. So I may not get the things from being accepted, and certainly there's plenty of judgment. Certainly there's plenty of judgment, and at times it's uncomfortable. But I've got such a sense of being true to myself that it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I'll let you speak. I'm just to feedback on that. I think what it made me aware of is what's got me through that is just doing it, and then experiencing, oh, it's okay, and actually trusting myself is more important. And I think the more you do it,
definitely. Okay. And also they have a point, you know, they do have a point. That's often the hardest bit, is we want to argue against it, or we feel that because they have a point, because we can't say that's not true, then we have to change our way. But you can have different things be true and be valid at the same time. So yes, they have a point that it's really sensible to have a stable income. It's perfectly valid, and it's not what's most important to me, how I'm living right now. So thanks. Shall we have a cup of tea?
Yeah, great. Viviana, do you want to say?
Yeah, I was basically going to say what you said, Catherine, which is discomfort is never nice for anybody. However, it is like resilience, it's a muscle. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And that's in general. So when you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, you become okay with being uncomfortable. And I think that is the key. Just, nobody likes it. It'll feel really bad the first few times, but then you're kind of like, okay, you know, and as Cathy was saying, everybody has a different perspective on life, and they're all valid. And so it's what's valid for you. And we all judge everybody else anyways, based on what we believe. And so ultimately it's about kind of exercising the discomfort muscle, just like we need to exercise our resiliency muscle.
Yeah, and I guess recently we've been kind of forced into that more, haven't we? In the last year we have, yeah.
And so going back to that, when Cathy was speaking, I think that is one of the blessings that, you know, of all the discomfort we've had in the last year, this idea of what we actually need as far as living, what we need to spend, and what we don't need to spend. And I think the last year for many people has brought that, because a lot of us have lost most of our income. And it's kind of, okay, not only reevaluating what we need, but also how we can get there. And we're looking for different ways of doing that as well.
Absolutely. And I do feel that has been a gift of this time, an imposed gift, but on the whole, a gift. Yeah, thank you for
I do agree. And it's also, we're going to have a split in society for the people who saw that gift and took it, and the people who still fight for the income levels. And our egos are so fabulously determined to defend us that they try awfully hard. Our ego tries awfully hard to stop us seeing through this kind of thing. So it does take quite a crash for us to give up all of our avoidance mechanisms and hit the crunch point of living a normal life in society is unhealthy. Like we're conditioned to believe that we fail, that it's it is our failing if we aren't making it in society. We're conditioned to believe that. So it's incredibly hard to step off of the hamster wheel, mixing too many metaphors. But there is an incredible opportunity in it. There's an incredible opportunity in crashing. And the society as a whole, having crashed in the last year, is an extraordinary opportunity, and a lot of people won't psychologically go there, but I think over the next decade, certainly the happier people, the healthier people, will be the people who accepted a crash, who accepted a personal, a financial crash, or a ego crash, and rebuilt themselves from deeper values. Because it's very easy to carry on feeling good because of our position in society, because of our job title, because we're making it financially. It's very easy to have those things be what makes you feel good. And we cling on to that very, very hard. That's understandable and reasonable. And only if you allow a crisis to really take you, do you find that deeper level of fulfillment. And in 10 years' time, the happier, healthier people will be the people who went there.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Cathy. So I've got a question from David on our live feed. So the question is, if someone feels trapped in their economic situation, what is the first step towards changing things?
Well, my advice is crash, which is, I feel really uncomfortable giving that advice because I feel it's irresponsible, but it depends it depends on your circumstances. So I had some good fortune in that all of the people I was responsible for were responsible for themselves. I didn't have dependents in that way. So I didn't have to crawl back and cling to something really unhealthy. I rate having a crash personally, I really do. And there's a more gradual approach, which is to look every day at what you're bought into, what unconscious beliefs you've bought into. That spend even an hour a day, maybe journaling, looking for concepts you've bought into that are controlling your life, that are having you live by other people's narratives, and work back towards your own values. It takes an awful lot of uncovering. That takes work, but if it's an hour a week or a flash of inspiration out in nature somewhere, that is a very constructive, gradual process that can be taken on.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that it really does depend on your personal situation, and there are the basics that we all need met: food, shelter. And so if you don't have that, you can't really sit and think about all these other things that we're talking about, our projections on money. No, we just can't. So there is this basic survival that we do need to take care of for ourselves and for our dependents, which is food, shelter. And only then, and we need to be aware of that, because I think in a lot of these conversations, we think about we have everything met, and then we don't think about for those people who don't. They don't have the luxury to sit and think about, what they're projecting onto money. So that is one thing. And so you do want to have something in place that's meeting your survival needs, definitely. Once those are met, if you're uncomfortable with your economic situation, yes, then why? I would say, which is basically the same thing that Cathy is saying. Why are you uncomfortable? What need is not being met after the survival needs? What else isn't being met? And is your economic situation going to get you there, or can something else get you there? I think that's an important perspective, but it is a luxury to be able to have that analysis.
I don't completely agree with that. I do and I don't. I understand it's valid. The issue becomes what we think are essential needs, what we think we have to be able to go there. So I have, for example, had to navigate in the last couple of years being taken to court for money that I couldn't pay, feeling like I was losing my mind, not being able to afford loo paper. You know, I wasn't in a comfortable position. I was not in a comfortable position, but I was psychologically strong, even though somehow I was managing to be psychologically strong and have a breakdown at the same time. I knew I wanted to go through the inquiry. I trusted the goal. I trusted the end point. And I knew there'd be a whole pile of tough stuff along the way, but that it was really worth going there. And my concern would be with how you phrased it, which is not to say it's not a valid point. I wouldn't want people to think I have to have a lot in place to be safe to have this inquiry. I've budgeted £1 a meal for a few years now, and my whole living costs are now under £200 a month, and I have faced things that are very much not coping, as in when your personal economy collapses. So I do think it's worth going into that inquiry, even if it means your finances really, really crash.
So I'll bring a different perspective to this question.
Mm.
So I work as a psychotherapist, and I slightly more agree with Viviana in the perspective of the human being can't access a certain level of critical thinking when they are in survival mode.
I agree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I agree. And the problem is the ego will stop you ever getting out of the receiving comfort from these external sources. And so you never find your incredible well of self-love, self-confidence, self-resilience. It is difficult. It's difficult
okay
to know. Well, it's not even that. I know it's a dangerous thing to propose, because, but I mean, I would say it's not quite true, but I would say I spent 6 months sitting on a sofa going wibble, which isn't true, but that's how it felt to me. I lost my clear, rational thought. Perhaps the best I can say right now is, if you have that experience, it doesn't mean it's terrible. You know, it doesn't mean that's the end of the road for you. You can go through that experience, and it can be an incredible rock bottom on which you find the most strong foundation to build something amazing and new. Yeah, I'd stand by that as a don't panic if you find yourself there, more than a recommendation to go there.
So no, I totally get that. I mean, I think the second conversation we had was embracing chaos, and right. I read something in the beginning of that from a spiritual teacher who was saying that everything goes through this process to reform something else, and everything has to sort of crash and dismantle. Everything in nature follows that rhythm before it can reform into something else. So it is part of the process, you know, like we can't go from one thing to another without that dismantling, chaotic, unknown, all of that stuff, you know. So to sort of consciously embrace the dismantling, the chaos, the unknown, the fear, all of that, you know, enables us to kind of transition into a new phase. So that I totally agree with. But I also I really resonated with what Viviana said around, you know, acknowledging those people who are in literal survival situations day on day, which you've experienced, Cathy. I've experienced briefly in my life at points. And when you're in that phase, it's like you know, all your energy is taken up with getting food or getting water, or, you know, like all your energy is on that, on the basics. So
Yeah.
I really, I think there's definitely truth in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I was saying, just to simplify it, is food and shelter. It doesn't have to be your food. It doesn't have to be your shelter, but you need somewhere to sit, to sleep, and then some food to eat. And again, it doesn't have to be yours, but you do need to have those basics met before you can start to have that transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to check in, because we've only got about 8 minutes left. With the questions we did at the beginning, VIVIANA, did we kind of, have we spoken to those answers, or did we kind of have chance to sort of look at what people were answering and what you feel that can offer us as an insight into where to go?
So we did discuss this a little bit, and one of the things, again, oversimplifying, is which we talked about, is generally these answers tend to be very positive or very negative depending on what your perspective is on money. And ultimately, I think what's really powerful about those exercises, and the one about your money story, so a moment in your life and what money has meant, a moment in your life where money has been important and what money has meant to you at that point. I think all of these exercises show us that the qualities that we project onto money, and I think that's kind of the main lesson. It would have been nice to have some interaction and see what people were responding to that and dig a little bit deeper, but time doesn't allow for that. But when you start digging, in times when I have done this, when you start digging a little bit deeper, a lot of these qualities that come to mind have to do sometimes with personal experience in your childhood, or even in your home currently. So if money has been a source of conflict, you kind of associate money with conflict, and that's a very common one. So conflict, stability, security, those tend to be really common words that are given to money. Then if you are more of a anti-capitalist, or you don't like the system, you tend to give money words like divisive or unequal, not just, whatever that may be. And I guess the purpose of all of this is, one, we're projecting our beliefs onto money, or we're projecting who we are onto money. And it's kind of doing that work of, look at the words you wrote, everybody who did the exercise. Think about why you wrote those words and kind of reclaim it. And one way that this is done is kind of saying, I am divisive, I am conflict, I am stability, I am security. Reclaiming that instead of projecting it onto money. That's not to say that money perhaps isn't important at different times, but it's also the meaning we give to it. So I'll give you an example for me, which is funny because as Cathy was saying, I hadn't done this consciously for many, many years until I kind of sat down and thought, but I believe that I have is money will be there when I need it. And what that has meant is that money is there when I need it. It may not be my money, going back to this whole breaking down. I may get into debt, but it's there and I can use it. And so, kind of breaking down our beliefs, our stories, the why we have those, and reclaiming it, because money is really a tool. It's an agreement, and that's all really that it is. What we project onto it is how our life ends up becoming. So then you get, if you think money is positive, you get people accumulating a lot of it. If you think money is negative, many times you get people who are very much into debt. And then it's kind of this back and forth between those two. So I think that's where the value of that exercise really, really is. So yes, I invite everybody who did it to go back and look at those words and kind of think about that.
Thanks, VIVIANA. Anything to add to that, Cathy?
No.
Okay. Well, thanks. Is there anything? I mean, I feel like I've got a lot to think about from this conversation, really personally, because it was interesting for me when I answered those questions. I think it was the third question: how do they relate? And I just put, I feel lost to answer this. I really was, and I really struggled. So I'd be interested to hear from other people if they want to contact us afterwards and let us know how they got on with those questions, because I noticed I really struggled to sort of sink below the surface of what these things actually mean in life. And I just thought that was really interesting. I consider myself quite an aware person, and yet these two things that are really important aspects of my life, I had very little awareness of under the surface of. So I think that's really interesting.
I will add maybe a thought that I have on that, and that's because potentially, I don't know if this is true for you, but maybe because for you, they haven't been related. You said yourself that a lot of the work you do is not for money. And so maybe they're not related. And so that is why you come to that point. I think for a lot of people, we have been conditioned that we work for money, and whatever we don't do for money is not work. It's volunteering, it's whatever else, but it's not work.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that may lie.
Thank you. Thanks, ladies. Really great conversation. I really appreciate both of your contributions. I like that we had little disagreements and found harmony. That was awesome. And just to say, we've had really active dialogue going on the live chat this week, more than any other week, and there's a lot of appreciation for what you've both shared. So thank you very much, and thanks to our live audience who've been engaging this week. Really nice to have them with us. So
thank you, Catherine, and thank you everybody who listened. And I will pose this question again: what narrative are we taking forward?
Thank you. And I feel we may continue this. I think when we spoke previously, I said I can imagine there's going to be part 1, 2, 3, and 4 of this conversation, because there is so much to explore in this. And Cathy, thank you for actually, giving us a way to sort of dismantle our relationship with it and giving us something really practical to work with. So I hope that's useful for people.
Pleasure.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
So just to mention, next week we'll be talking on family and parenting, and we've got 3 really interesting parents from very different perspectives, looking at the work of deep adaptation, climate breakdown, financial resourcing, and family and parenting, and how they kind of go together. So it's I'm not a parent myself, but I'm genuinely inspired by these 3 parents and their perspectives on what they're doing and how they're sort of rethinking these things with their families and their communities. So really interesting conversation happening next week on that. If you're following us on YouTube, it's Community Resilience Live Talks, same on Facebook, and same on Spotify if you're listening to the podcast. And if you'd like to find out more about our speakers who are speaking today, if you look in the description on any of those points, you will see their websites and information if you'd like to find out more about them. That's it. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Take care, and best of luck with the continuation of all your work. Thank you. Okay.
All the best.
Bye.
Community.